Hey there, welcome to Insert Memory Card, a nostalgic podcast based around video gaming, music, movies, and whatever the heck else we want to talk about. I am Josh, joined with my co-host, also by the same name, Josh. How's it going, man?
It's going, dude.
Anything crazy with cats or anything like that?
With cats?
Yeah, because, you got that cat that you kind of love him, but you kind of don't at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I won the cat lottery, honestly. I'm not normally a cat person.
Right.
But Fred is just like the chillest. When you want him, you can pick him up and you can grab him and play with him. But then when you don't want him, he'll leave you alone, which is perfect.
Yeah, that's pretty much Gatsby. And to be clear for those people out there who hate cats, Josh and I are both just animal lovers. So that's not what this podcast is about, though. It's actually about just nostalgia and us reliving some old memories and just talking about things that we enjoyed as kids. And we're both 90s kids. And I feel like there are podcasts out there that fits for some of the 80s kids, some of those kind of like Gen Z people. But I don't know of anything that's for 90s kids and from our perspective. Like I've seen and heard stuff that's more from people that grew up with a original Nintendo, and then they were like teenagers when the Super Nintendo came out and stuff like that. But I've personally not experienced anything that's, people like us who were younger when the N64 came out, and then, teenagers with like the sixth generation and stuff. So I just feel like we're filling a spot that's not being filled currently. So anyways, that's why I wanted to start this, and that's why I asked Josh if he would join in my crusade of spreading the goodness and awesomeness of old stuff, because I guess we're getting old now. So, when you can say it's been decades since you've done something, you're officially old.
Yeah, man, I know. It's like we were at a shoot on Tuesday, a couple hours into it. My back just started hurting for no reason. I was like, oh God, my back.
My back. Dude, you're not even officially 30 yet. No, you are 30. Wait. Yes.
I
yes.
am.
Yeah, May.
I am.
May, I knew that.
Yeah. Yeah, my drummer goes, how old are you again? I was like, I'm 30. And he's like, yep, it's time.
Yep. Dude, there's like a switch that flips on. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe in 5 years we can reminisce about turning 30 and how much it sucked, I guess. That'll be episode like 300.
Yeah, we're obviously pre-nostalgic here.
Yes, for sure.
Because like you said, there's nobody talking about the 90s yet. We're the first ones to it.
Yeah, people like the people I've heard that talk about things from the 90s, they're talking about it from just a different perspective. They're not talking about it from that kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like little kid perspective. It's more from like the perspective of a teenager or somebody in college. So anyways, for those who grew up after the 90s, or for those who grew up, in the 80s and were older in the 90s, now you can hear from us and hear what our perspective's like, because I love to hear what it's like growing up from the perspective of somebody who, was in the arcades, like the arcades, the original Dig Dug and the stuff you see on like Stranger Things, but we didn't really experience that. We were more like Hydro Thunder and Cruisin' USA. And so we kind of experienced arcades on the decline. But so when I reached out to you about the show, I kind of threw some ideas out there and I was like, let's start with some gaming stuff. And I gave you some options and you picked the Nintendo 64. So
yeah,
the thing I wanted to start with is, why did you pick that over anything else that we could have talked about?
Well, I think the N64 specifically is just kind of ripe with oddities,
Yeah.
Even compared to like other Nintendo systems, and like what they tend to do as far as technology goes, and like they don't necessarily follow along with cutting edge technology,
right?
Like Xbox, Sony, Microsoft, and PlayStation. They're always kind of pushing the envelope to do what's newest and what's best,
right?
And sometimes that can be buggy because it's untested and you don't know what's going to happen,
right?
Nintendo, I feel like traditionally is a little bit behind that curve And what they do is they use proven technologies that aren't necessarily the newest, but people know how to use them appropriately by this point. So they just make really solid, like flawless games. But the N64 is like the one outlier in that category. Yeah, it's definitely the most advanced, technologically speaking, that Nintendo has done over their lifetime of making video games.
100%. And I think the GameCube was similar, but I agree. If you look at it, and we're going to do an episode on the N64 versus the PS1. So for those of you who want to hear that kind of stuff, you just stay tuned, because we're definitely talking about that, because that's just too meaty to talk about for this episode. But yeah, I agree. This was back during the days when you would say bits. The PlayStation 1 was a 32-bit console. The Sega Saturn was a 32-bit console. And here comes the N64 that's a quote-unquote 64-bit console. It was weird, man, because it was like... we'll get into it in a second. Let me give a quick, boring history lesson for those who are unaware. So the N64 was released June 1996 in Japan, September 1996 in North America, and the poor Europeans got it in March of 97. So those poor guys just kind of got screwed over.
They always do.
They always do. That's right. It sold 32 million units. Which was a good bit less than the PlayStation. And then it had 296 games in North America with 393 worldwide. Most of those exclusives were in Japan. I'm sure Europe got a few, but most of that extra number were Japanese only games. It's actually a pretty cool system to collect from the perspective of it's not a ton of games.
Yeah.
You can have an almost complete library with the exception of, I don't know if you heard of the copy of Clay Fighter 64 that was like Blockbuster only or something crazy like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so there's like...
Do you mean 63 and a third?
Yeah, that one. But there was like a special, is like 63 and a third director's cut or something like that. You know what? Let me just pull this up so I don't sound like a doofus. Rare.
I was going to say, I think about 63 and a third a lot. Because I did rent it from Blockbuster, and it's a game that I didn't own when I owned an N64, but I liked playing it.
Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut. Now, this was Reddit in February 7th of 2019, but apparently at that time, somebody was asking $4,000 for it sealed.
What?
Yeah. Now, I will say this. A sealed copy, I don't even know how that was found, because you think about, we're probably going to talk about rental stores at some point in a future episode as well, but you think about just how Blockbuster works. Employees get it, they pull the cartridge out, throw away everything, and then they rent the cartridge, and so...
Right.
Anyways, so beyond a game like that, it's a great system to collect for, and it has great games, and we're going to talk about some favorite games here in a second, but the PlayStation kind of came about because Nintendo was going to work with Sony to have a disc-based system. And most people know this, but just in case you don't. And Nintendo got kind of gun shy, and they were a little concerned about licensing issues. And so Sony was going to take a cut of the pie. And so Nintendo was like, we don't want to do that. And they were kind of in a similar place that Sony was going into the launch of the PS3. Like they just thought they were the greatest thing ever. And so they just thought they could do what they want. Basically, they tried to undermine Sony and work with a different disk drive maker. That fell through, but Sony got mad, and basically their executives were like, we're going to take him down. And so the PlayStation itself is like this little revenge story. So it's kind of crazy that this, iconic system that Sony makes could have almost not been a thing. But we'll talk more about that later. I just thought I would throw that out there that, there was originally a Nintendo PlayStation, which is just crazy. And somebody has a working one, actually. Did you see that?
Yeah, I've been keeping up with it on Ben Heck's channel.
Oh, okay.
I watched. It's got to be at least 3 or 4 years ago now when it was first revealed that this guy had one, and Ben Heck. I don't even know if that's his real last name, but that's what his channel's called.
Sure.
But Ben helped him diagnose it and go through all the circuitry and kind of figure out what was doing what and which parts were Nintendo, which parts were Sony based. And when they first found it, it wasn't running. But Ben actually helped him put it all back together into a running system. And it just sold I want to say a couple of months ago, not very long ago, at auction. I don't remember what the price was.
$100 billion.
Probably.
I just went from Dr. Evil to a random Scottish person within one syllable. So I'm pretty proud of myself about that, frankly. I'm just going to be real. Okay, so one thing I wanted to ask you was, what was the first time you played an N64? Because you had one. I didn't have one as a kid. I have one now, but you did, right?
Yeah, I want to say you said it was released in '96, right?
Right.
I want to say like when I was a kid, my uncle on my mom's side is only like 10 or 12 years older than I am.
Yeah.
So when I was really small, he was a teenager.
Right.
And I remember, I want to say he rented one from Blockbuster. Like you could basically rent like a suitcase with a video game console in it.
How nuts is that? Could you imagine?
I mean, I saw it firsthand, but I want to say my first exposure to it was my uncle playing Mario 64 in '96.
Now, had you played anything prior to that, like Super Nintendo?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, NES and Super Nintendo, and maybe even Genesis before that point. I'm not sure. And then I don't know if it was that year or the next year, but my parents got me one for Christmas with Mario 64 and GoldenEye were my first two games.
Okay. I thought Rush was one of your first games, which we're going to talk about in a minute, which I'm pretty excited about because that's just such a great random game.
Yeah, it's a really cool arcade port,
Yeah, with just the worst physics engine in history, which is why it's awesome. Anyways, we'll have to talk more about that in a second. So the first time I played one was my cousin Steven, who was a year younger than me. So I had a PlayStation 1. He had an N64. And I think the first game I played on it, I remember playing Cruisin' USA.
Nice.
And that was the first time that I was like, this is, and now if you look at it side by side, there's a difference. But at the time, as a kid with no point of reference, it's like, whoa, this is arcade quality. Like, this is exactly the arcade game, and I'm sure if you actually were at an arcade machine and looked at the N64 version, I'm sure it's significantly less, not as good looking, blah, 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 maybe not as much sprite detail or whatever. But to a like 7-year-old kid, 8-year-old kid, it was just crazy. He had a steering wheel with gas pedal and stuff that hooked into it. And so it was just like,
oh, nice.
Oh my gosh, the arcade's at home,
Yeah.
So that's really my first memory. I also remember him playing Yoshi's Story, which it was just like a chill, nice game. I feel like that game could be like a therapy game or something. Like you come home and you're stressed out and it's like, let's just play the easiest game ever created ever. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Well, that's a sequel to Yoshi's Island, right? Or is it a different game?
Kind of. So Yoshi's Island is technically a sequel to Super Mario World.
Yeah, it's weird.
And so Yoshi's Story is like Yoshi only, whereas the Yoshi's Island, it's Yoshi with Baby Mario on his back. And so Yoshi, I mean, they are similar. I don't know if it counts as a sequel or not. It's just so different. It's so like the best comparison I can draw it to is like Blue's Clues or something. It's like this paper mache. You laugh, but it's true. Like, go pull up screenshots. It's like this little paper mache Yoshi kind of thing running around. It's really, I feel like for the time it was pretty, I don't know. It looked neat to me as a kid. I remember thinking it looked cool and having fun playing it. All of those Yoshi's games are similar.
But it doesn't say Super Mario World 3 on it or something like that?
No, it's just like Yoshi's Story.
Okay.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. Anyways, I was blown away. And Steven and I actually traded consoles for a while. So I had his N64 and he had just a boatload of awesome games. Like he had Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask, Donkey Kong 64, Mario World, Yoshi's Story, Cruisin' USA. It just was like, the list goes on and on. He had one of those containers that held all the cartridges in it, just the like plastic kind of containers. And it was such a great trade. We traded that for like a month.
And then you never traded back.
Yeah, we traded it back. I was at the time I really liked his N64, and that's really what caused me to get a GameCube later on in 6th grade, which I would just like to say history was on my side and I picked the best console from that generation, but we'll save that for a different conversation later. I'm just gonna put that out there. One thing I wanted to mention is and talk about is the idea that Nintendo made a really stupid decision to do cartridges in the N64.
Okay.
So the PlayStation was, as I said earlier, 32-bit. N64 was 64-bit. So technically, at a very quick glance, it's like, oh, the N64 should be more powerful. But when you look at a game like Final Fantasy IX versus pick any later N64 game, but let's take Tony Hawk Hawk's Pro Skater 2, something like that.
Sure.
Apparently, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 came out on the N64 as well, which was nuts. I watched some footage of that.
Yeah.
But you look at one of those games versus like a Final Fantasy 9, and it's like, why does it not look as good? So I feel like there's some hardware. That was back in the day when hardware was very different, whereas now it's very similar to just a PC. I don't know. I guess people just learned more tricks on the PS1, but the N64 should have been more powerful, I think.
There's a lot of interesting information to dig in there, and I don't know if you know how like put on your glasses nerdy you want to get.
Well, my glasses are on, so
like it's probably not going to be very entertaining information. So if you want to cut any of this, you can, but I can tell you that their main reasoning for going with a cartridge over a disc was piracy, right?
Right.
So they wanted to prevent piracy because ripping a disc is much easier than fooling the internal security systems that they had built into the cartridges and the motherboard of the N64.
Right.
So that was their biggest concern. And you're right about storage space, especially back then, you could only fit so much information on a solid state disc or chip like that,
Yeah, it was 64 megs versus 660 on a PS1 disc. Just one PS1 disc. That's 10 times the information, almost. Or no, more than 10 times.
Yeah. Most N64 ROMs that I've seen have been around 12 megabytes.
That's just nuts.
Yeah. So obviously the amount of information you can fit on a disc is just insane compared to what you can fit on a cartridge.
Right.
When you look at textures, usually the PlayStation is going to win over the N64 when it comes to textures.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, when you're thinking about like the way the grass looks or the way walls or trees or skylines, that kind of thing, the PlayStation's always going to have a better result there. Like if you look at, like you were saying, like with Final Fantasy.
Right.
And a lot of those background images are like literal drawings or illustrations,
Right.
And then they just map the world on top of that illustration. So you're getting a hand-painted visual aspect on the PlayStation 1, which would just be impossible on an N64.
Yeah, with the exception of Resident Evil 2, which is like, did you see that video on how they like compressed it to fit on a cartridge?
I did, yeah. Modern Vintage Gamer.
Yeah, that dude's awesome. If anybody is listening to this that doesn't watch his channel, you should watch his channel.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, and he has a cool accent, so that always helps.
Yeah, he's basically like a developer.
Yeah, and he coded some original Xbox emulation stuff back in the day, which, I mean, what an OG.
Yeah.
Like that's back when you had to be just in tune with coding and all of those things in order to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how far away you want to get from the N64, but that was kind of like the first era. Well, not the first one, but as far as like easily accessible internet goes.
Right.
Yeah. And like the popularization of forums and stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas like in the 90s they existed, but it wasn't nearly as popular.
Right.
But then you get into like the original Xbox era and a lot of more people are online sharing information, and they were talking about how to hack systems, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, so the cartridge thing in my mind, and Nintendo's historically been just very anal about making sure that things are about piracy, exactly. Like they've sent cease and desist stuff to Emu Paradise and all those cool ROMs, or insert any website that has ROMs on it that people know about.
Right.
And part of the reason that was a stupid idea is I remember back in the day, and I'm sure you do as well, PlayStation games were like $40 to $50, and N64 games were $60, sometimes a little more if it was popular, but like $50 to $60. I did a little calculator to see what that would be in today's money, and that's $100 a game in today's money.
Yeah.
And so you're putting this premium on games that are really, really great games, don't get me wrong, but it's just when a parent goes into Walmart, it's hard to justify that buying. And so I think that's what really hurt. I think that's one of the things that really hurt the N64 was their crazy anti-piracy stuff, causing them to pick a at the time inferior type of storage. Now it's superior from the sense of longevity.
Yeah, cartridges these days, you're definitely not wanting for disk space.
Right.
And they're much faster than discs as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a win-win to go with a cartridge nowadays.
Right. But back then it just wasn't the best idea. But also just in terms of retro collecting, have you heard of disc rot? This like crazy phenomenon?
No.
So people are trying to narrow down what causes it. And it's worse with Sega games specifically, like Sega CD, Sega Saturn.
Okay.
But the data literally rots out of the disc. And so if you look, if there's like a see-through part on the label, because you know how some of them it would just like not have anything, you know, it might say like Sonic and everything else is blue, but Sonic is clear on top of the disc.
Sure.
So if you look through one of those, you'll literally see a hole in the disc, but it's not a physical hole. It's a hole in the data that's just like rotten.
Huh.
Yeah, it's this really weird.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's I saw it, another YouTuber that I watch, Metal Jesus.
Oh yeah, I know him.
They were talking about that on one of their episodes. He's so nice. I feel like he's like one of the nicest people ever. He's like never being down on anything. He's just like, yeah, I like this. And even if he like doesn't like it, he's like, this is okay. That's like the worst you're going to get from him. But anyways, yeah, I think the cartridge thing, like you look at 32 million units sold, you know, the Super Nintendo, I think was like 60 million and the original Nintendo was 40, but that was also back when way less people were into games. Yeah. So the original PlayStation sold 104 million. So a little more than 3 times the amount of consoles on the N64. And I think it just came down to the fact that games were cheaper. Like I really think that played into it because that was back in the day, you know, our grandparents and parents literally referred to video game consoles as the Nintendo. It didn't matter what it was.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was like, go play your Nintendo, you know? So it wasn't brand recognition. I think it was the games being just too expensive because of being cartridges because the console was cheap too.
Yeah.
It sold for $199 day one.
Yeah.
And the PlayStation 1, I think, was $299.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Nintendo recognizes that mistake, like you're just saying, because they obviously haven't gone back to that plan since then. You know, they did that deal with, what was it, Silicon. It was the same guys who made the graphics for Terminator.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Silicon, I know what you're talking about. I'm trying to pull it up really quick. Silicon Graphics.
Yeah, it's just Silicon Graphics. So they were like the front runner for 3D graphic engineering at the time.
Right.
Like they were doing all kinds of movies like Terminator and The Abyss and stuff like that. Like if you wanted computer graphics, they were doing the best you could get. And Nintendo, they struck up a deal with them to basically put their technology in a home console, which is kind of like nuts. And it's on the bleeding edge, like I was talking about earlier. It's the only time they've ever done that.
Yeah, whereas, you know, Sega's always attempted to be on the bleeding edge, and it kind of hurt them, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I kind of blame Sega of America for all that. It wasn't really the Japanese. It wasn't really their fault.
That's true. That doesn't seem to me, just to make a sweeping generalization, that doesn't seem like a very Japanese thing to do. Is like, you know, like you think about a Toyota or a Honda, they're typically over-engineered. So anytime car manufacturers that are Japanese make like a really awesome car, it's still, you know, think of old Supras. They can handle so much put into them because they're just so over-engineered. So it's just seems like a very, you know, Japanese thing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a 2JZ is basically just a giant hunk of iron.
Right. So one thing I wanted to talk about was this idea of, has history been rude to the N64? And so I want to preface that statement with this, or that question with this.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think that a lot of the more outspoken voices on YouTube and in the gaming scene are of a older generation. So once again, like I mentioned earlier, that generation that grew up with a Super Nintendo and a NES, as opposed to like they were little when they had an NES and then like a teenager when they had a Super Nintendo, something like that.
Sure.
And so between that generation and then the generation that's followed us, that, you know, maybe they were little when the original Xbox came out and then teenagers when the 360 came out, like young teenagers, like middle school. So that generation and younger, and then a generation above us, they seem to hate on the 5th generation of consoles. And I specifically the N64, everybody seems to love the PlayStation. They're like, oh yeah, it's fine. You know, turn it upside down. There's things that sucked about it, but that's okay. But the N64 is just terrible. You know, like people, that seems to be the thing. And I just don't agree. So I have a few things that people tend to talk about. So I kind of wanted to go one category at a time. People either love or hate the controller. So tell me, where do you stand on it?
That's tough because like it's cool that it's unique. Seeing it through the lens of that's my childhood controller, like I'm obviously gonna like it,
right?
Because that's the thing that I had when I was a kid. So that's the thing, you know? But
Sure.
and then also as a plus, I think they were the first ones to do an analog joystick, right?
Yep.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. So like when you first control Mario or whatever in a 3D environment, that was the first time you ever got an analog feel controlling something like that. That had never happened before, you know?
Right.
Having said that, I think the GameCube is a massive improvement.
Oh, I completely agree on that one. I think you're crazy if you don't at least really like the GameCube controller.
Yeah.
But do you hate the N64 controller?
I don't hate it. I don't think there's really been a game controller that I've ever hated that wasn't third party, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Like every time I remember going to the store, and I don't know if you were this way, but it didn't matter what it was. If it was third party, I was like, why are you even making this? Like, who's like, no, just don't even try. Like the only exception to that was my cousin Steven. Once again, he's going to come up in this a lot. He had a kind of PlayStation shaped N64 controller.
Uh-huh.
And that was pretty neat. It was weird. If you pull it up, I don't remember what it was called, but like one side was fatter than the other side.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So instead of it being even on both sides, it's like the left side is like really fat and then the right side is much thinner. It didn't seem to bug me, but that was a neat design, I have to say. It looks weird, but it felt pretty good. But anyways, in thinking about the controller, first of all, of course, I prefer the GameCube controller. There's that new controller called the Brawler 64 that looks pretty nice. I'll open with that, but I think people are hating on something that you just need to look at with proper context. Like if you think about it, the three-prong design, as dumb as it seems, it's like, okay, if you put your hand on the left side of it where the D-pad is, and then on the right side with the buttons, then you have this kind of like weird SNES controller thing.
Right.
And then if you move it to the middle, that's your like kind of pilot joystick with a trigger.
Right.
And so my hand gravitated naturally towards the joystick and I just grabbed it from the middle and the side. I don't remember, and I could be wrong, but I don't remember being taught that that was the way you did it. And other people, especially the older generations, they act like they were confused about it. And I'm like, what's to be confused about? If it's 3D, you grab the analog stick and put your hand in the middle. I don't know. That's just me. I get kind of annoyed by that because I'm like, if you just think for 2 seconds what you should do, not even in grabbing the controller, but like what would a company do that's never been done before? Sony had the wonderful blessing of being able to look at Nintendo's design and then capitalize on that and go, okay, we're going to make that design better and make more sense to people. I'm sure they had focus groups where they like showed somebody an N64 controller and had them complain about it to them and then used that to determine controller designs. Like that would not surprise me at all. So before Sony came out with the DualShock 2 or the original DualShock, which was like 3 years later, like 99, something like that, came out with Ape Escape. I had one. Speaking of which, Ape Escape is a great game. I don't know. I'm just like, if you don't have the context of having an analog stick on a controller, which Nintendo didn't, to me, the three-pronged design makes sense. I'm not saying it's the greatest controller ever, because it's not. I'm just saying I think people are way too hard on this control. Like, people aren't hard on other things, you know, like people aren't hard on...
Stop saying hard on.
That's a good point. Harsh too. There we go.
No, I think part of the issue with like folks not recognizing what you're supposed to do in the moment, I think a lot of that is just for younger people, it's easier to grasp a new concept. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
it's the same
enough.
reason it's easier for a little kid to learn a second language, or like, you know, when babies are playing with iPads before they can learn how to talk. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like when we were kids, and I do feel like we had a sort of special connection with technology because we really did kind of develop alongside a lot of really important technology, you know?
Yeah, I agree. We should talk about that, by the way. That would be a great topic to talk about how I just think that would be a really good topic. Just talk about technology and its movements and its growth with our generation specifically.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up alongside the internet, basically.
Yeah. And alongside just graphical upgrades, like graphics have gotten to the point now where you're talking about these fine detail things where like I show my wife a Xbox Series X game and she's like, that looks the same as what you have. Like, why do you want to buy this? You know? And it's because it's these like small details. Now, don't get me wrong, ray tracing's awesome, but you know what I mean? Like we experienced these huge leaps, 2D to 3D. Like what? that was just insane. And then 3D to 3D that actually looked like something instead of just blocks. So, you know, anyways, well, okay, that's the first thing. And speaking of 3D that looks like blocks, the second thing that I wanted to bring up about has history been rude to the N64 is its graphics.
Right.
And once again, we're going to do an N64 versus PlayStation 1. But in my head, I always liked the way the N64 games looked more than PlayStation 1. I think now that's not counting stuff like a Final Fantasy IX where they like really knew what they were doing. So I'm talking more the original Metal Gear Solid, stuff like that. So the more iconic, like really jagged textures that are on the walls that like it's supposed to be a straight line, but it's zigzagging. It's literally like a snake slithering and then it moves when you move and stuff like that. I don't think anybody will argue that the graphics are primitive, but I think that Nintendo took a better approach, to me at least, with their graphics. Now, this isn't counting, I'm not talking about games that are like a port over, like Resident Evil 2 is more of that PlayStation style. So I'm not talking about games like that, but like at Mario or Banjo-Kazooie, those games.
What's funny, I mean, we've been talking about Resident Evil 2 a couple times already, and that's like a really special case, I feel. One, because it is a port, but interestingly, there are certain aspects of playing Resident Evil 2 on the N64 that actually outperform the PlayStation.
Oh, really? Like what?
Yeah, like with the textures, interestingly. Like I saw a really cool, it was that same video with from Modern Vintage Gamer when he did like a side by side with the two, I guess you could call them sprites or models of the main character, like side by side. And there's like less textural information on the N64 version, but the 3D model is more complex.
Okay.
Because it's 64 bits.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the number of polygons per model like you could have on screen was higher.
Right.
So even though the texture wasn't as, it wasn't as large of a file, it wasn't as high resolution as you would get on the PlayStation, the actual 3D model of the character in game is better than you'd see on PlayStation 1.
Interesting. I think I skipped over that part because I was not on purpose. I think I was like pressed for time because I had to like leave for work or something. I don't remember. Had to like go get ready or something.
Yeah.
Darn it, going to teach kids and change lives. How dare I?
Yeah, you should quit.
How dare I skip Modern Vintage Gamer?
Yeah, you should obviously quit. But like first party games, like you were saying with Mario or Banjo or something like that, with first party games, the part where it really struggles is also in texture. Like there was so much or so little space available on the cartridges for putting textures, and I want to say that the RAM for the graphics was also like pretty dang tiny.
Yeah, that's why they introduced that RAM expansion thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was necessary to run certain games like Donkey Kong 64. I know my copy of Donkey Kong came with the expansion pack.
Oh, nice. That game was we'll talk about it in a minute. Okay, so moving on. So you would say, well, actually, I don't know if you ever made a decision. Did you like the kind of blockier N64 style or the more textured PlayStation 1 style? Like what side do you lean towards?
I think if I was going to say one was superior, I'd probably go with PlayStation.
Okay.
Just because...
Do you think it's aged better too? Because that's my thing. I'm like, that's just a long.
That's again, this is probably really nerdy stuff that people don't want to hear, but like that's kind of a complex question, because there's a lot of new ways to play PS1 right now, actually.
Right.
Like if you hook up your N64 to your modern TV, you're basically going to be using some sort of third-party upscaler to go from RCA to HDMI, right?
Right.
And some of those have like
they had component and S-video, or excuse me, composite and S-video. So you can.
Yeah. What resolution would S-video be? Is it 720?
So it's all 240p. No. So you would run 240p into some sort of upscaler to get it to 480p. It would be like a line doubler, but then other things like the open source scan converter. And by the way, this isn't too nerdy. Just like to say there are people who might want to play their N64 on their HD TV. So there's a device called the RetroTink, and it'll just double anything that's S-Video or composite. Golly, why did they name them like such a similar word? Anyways,
I know, and it's the opposite of what you would think it would be.
Yes. I the best way I can think of it is composite is a composite of all the color information into one little cable, whereas component has individual components of the RGB signal.
Sure.
Yeah, but I'm still going to probably mess them up 30 more times. But with composite, that's like, RF is your worst signal, which is the like coaxial cable that screws in, which my TVs,
I'm using one.
If you have an LG TV, they still have an RF jack, which is crazy. And to my eye, it doesn't look amazing by any means, but it's not that horrible. It's not great, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be.
It's kind of amazing how much information you can get out of that type of input jack.
Yeah, it really is. And so then there's composite, which is the yellow, and then S-Video is a superior video because essentially it separates your colors into like little micro pins, and then that goes into that one port. So it's one port, but it has separated color information. Or more separated. I know that like component is superior to that, and then RGB is the most superior one, the one input to rule them all, or output. So anyways, for people who are wanting to make their N64 look better, there's a device called the RetroTink 2X. And there's a few versions of it, but it's really great because you can just literally plug the yellow cable into it.
Yeah.
And it'll just line double it to 480p, which is kind of it was such a standardized video type that TVs know what to do with it. TVs don't know what to do with 240p, so they upscale it thinking it's something else. And so you'll get little artifacts. And some people don't care about those artifacts. But if like one example is Sonic on Genesis, the waterfall does not come out correctly when you're upscaling through inferior things, which I don't think it comes out correctly in a lot of situations. So really you need to just plug it into an old tube TV. But yeah, for me, back to the graphics thing though. So if you have an N64, just to clarify, get a line doubler and get an S-Video cable is the best you're going to do without modding it. You can modify one, but it really bang for your buck isn't doing that much. And there's the HDMI mod.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if there's an HDMI hardwired mod to the board for N64 like there is for PlayStation.
There is. It's and it looks incredible.
Okay.
It actually is, I would argue, unless you want to play on like a tube TV, in that case, just use S-Video. You're not really going to see much difference. You will see difference, but it's like very negligible, especially when you're doing a $150 mod to the board. Whereas you can do a $150 HDMI mod to the board and it looks awesome, dude. Like it is absolutely the best the N64s look.
Okay.
And so that's another option too for people that want to play N64 on your HD TVs. But
okay,
I think the RetroTink is probably the easiest way to connect multiple consoles. Get a switcher, run them all into the RetroTink, and then run that into it outputs HDMI. So
okay.
And it also switches. One thing it does that's great is it switches inputs easily. So like on a game like Silent Hill, which I know is an N64, but when it switches resolutions, the RetroTink doesn't hiccup like some upscalers do, which is, that's game breaking. When you're coming out of a menu in Silent Hill and there's a monster and you were just reloading a gun or something, it can kill you in the span of time that it takes for some upscalers to switch over and figure out what they're doing. So
yeah,
just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. So knowing that you can do the same type of mods with both systems, that's still tough. I guess PlayStation would win out graphically.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I do think that if you emulate PlayStation,
yeah,
I think it emulates nicer. there's a lot of shaders and blah, blah. I don't even know, but there's a lot of things you can do to emulate a PlayStation that can make it look pretty darn good. You need a really nice computer to do it with a really like heavy lifting processor. But anyways, I just wanted to see where you landed on graphics. I personally, I like the look of first party Nintendo 64 games. I think it was safer to have it just kind of be blocks of color.
Yeah.
And to me, it has this, I think Banjo-Kazooie, for example, which is kind of like second party, quote unquote, one of those Rare games.
Right.
And by Rare, I don't mean the game is Rare. I mean that Rare produced it. So that game has aged really well. Mario 64, it's aged okay. It looks pretty good, but I think Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie look really good. Like I don't really have an issue with the way they look.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's definitely a more timeless look because it's not trying to be hyper realistic. Like when you're going for,
that was my thing.
Yeah, when you're going for a realistic look and you do the best you can, and then time passes and technology improves, and now other people are trying to do stuff that looks hyper realistic, and theirs is obviously going to be way better. And then you're comparing the old realistic to the new realistic, and it's obviously not going to age that well.
Right.
Whereas, like, if you do something original that's more of an artsy look, that's going to be more timeless every time.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something, Nintendo has historically, kind of like you said earlier, they play it safe, with the exception of the N64, they play it safe on hardware. And I think they play it safe graphically by not trying to be realistic. You look at a game like Wind Waker, which at the time, and we'll talk about that game, but everybody, I don't know if you remember this, but everybody hated the way it looked. Like, I don't know a single person who wanted to buy that game, like in our group, because they were like, ooh, this is kiddie.
I don't remember the backlash when it happened, but I do know that it wasn't received very well because of the way it looked.
Yeah, and now everybody's like, oh, it's the greatest game ever, and it's because it aged great. Whereas like Twilight Princess didn't age as well. It's not bad, but yeah, I personally prefer the N64 look. I think it's aged fine. A lot of people give it crap though, and once again, I think there were two camps. There was this PlayStation kind of like texture camp, and then there was the N64 like more polygons but less texture, kind of blockier look.
Yeah.
And to me, as a kid, I always thought that blockier look was better. Like it's kind of weird. Like I thought the blockiness was a good thing, if that makes sense. Even like I owned Final Fantasy VIII, which looked great, and still thought that like Mario 64 looked better. I don't know what kind of fabricated reality I was living in that made me think that, but yeah, to me, it just, I don't know, something about it's pleasant, and maybe that's nostalgia, but guess what? That's what this is about. So I can fondly look on through my rose tinted glasses, and that's fine with me. I think the first party and then the like Rare produced games have aged pretty well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So the people that are hating on it need to calm down.
Yeah, a lot of the ports aren't super fantastic. And a lot of the like arcade ports, again, not very great, like Midway stuff.
Right.
Not fantastic, but all the first party titles and Rare games I think hold up really well. Not just because of the way they look, but also just the content of the games too.
Yeah, they had phenomenal games. And that's something I want to get to in 2 seconds. But for people who, for some reason, haven't played an N64, maybe you're younger, give it a try for sure. Just understand and realize that there's a historical context to these consoles that makes them harder to deal with than any other console generation. 2D is not hard to do. Like, no one fusses about a generation more than they do the fifth generation, in my opinion. As far as popular generations, like, there are some people that like Atari, but not many. So we're not talking about generations like that. Like, there are very few people that go back and play Atari games and genuinely enjoy it and are like, this is a great experience, Like Pac-Man on Atari, oh my gosh, that was just awful. People complain about the NES being very difficult, but that's not, that's just kind of a quarter munching kind of culture that was around in gaming in general. The Super Nintendo aged well. And so like with this generation, if somebody's playing this, just remember that like 3D had never been done before. And the closest thing they had done to 3D was like the Mode 7 graphics on the Super Nintendo, not Star Fox. That one was actually 3D, but like is basically this plane that kind of moved around.
You mean like F-Zero?
Yeah, like an F-Zero.
Yeah.
And it was like this kind of pseudo 3D, but even then the camera was locked to the car.
Right.
Or you think of Afterburner in the arcades, the camera was locked to the plane. Mario Kart, Pilot Wings, all these different things, the camera was locked. This was the first time that something was actually moving in 3D space without a locked camera. And so with that comes these little hiccups as far as camera controls goes. I think that's what C stands for on the C buttons. I think it literally just means like C for camera. And so
it does.
Yeah. So, for anybody who's playing an N64 game, just keep in mind that there's going to be some point where you get frustrated by the camera. But you know what? That still happens nowadays. Like the Medieval remake, it has camera issues, I'm hearing. So games aren't immune to it just because they're newer. But just keep in mind that that was a big hurdle. And at the time for us, it was just something that you just accepted because you didn't have any other context.
Yeah. I would actually say on that vein, if you are going to try an N64 game for the first time, I would probably not go with Super Mario 64.
Okay. What would you go with?
I would probably pick one of the Zelda titles.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I would probably say if you're going to play any N64 game right now for the first time, it should be Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, I think that one, I think Majora's Mask is great. And I think Banjo is, in my mind, I'm sorry, but Banjo is, they took Mario and they made it better in pretty much every way.
Yeah, I love Banjo.
Well, speaking of which, let's just name some favorite games. So I have a couple that I wanted to call out. So I've said it 30 times by now. Banjo-Kazooie was made by Rare, and it's a bear and this bird in his backpack. And I think one of my favorite things is that they're speaking, probably due to the limitations of the cartridge, is literally the same sound over and over. So Banjo is ooh, 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 and then Kazooie's burr, 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 burr.
Yeah.
And then every character is just some noise over and over, which is so great.
Yeah, it's kind of like a proto oh man, what's the language they call in Animal Crossing?
Oh, I don't even know. But yeah, it's very similar to that. I agree. I know what you're getting at.
It's pre-Animal Crossing voices.
Right. So yeah, I think if you want to play a platformer of some type, that Banjo is the way to go. Donkey Kong 64 controls and plays well, but that was when Rare got too eager. And everybody got too eager with the whole collectathon thing. And so you literally have characters that can only get their character-specific bananas. And that game takes like over 100 hours to complete or something crazy like that.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But completing it is literally you doing the same crap over and over, just as Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Lanky Kong,
right,
and whoever else. And so I don't recommend, if you're a OCD completionist type, I don't recommend Donkey Kong 64. If you're cool with just like kind of playing through it and enjoying it for a little bit, then it's a good game. It plays well. But yeah, I think Banjo was great. The thing that I liked about Banjo that felt better to me was he was a little weightier than Mario in the way that he just felt and controlled. There was just a little more heft to his movement.
Yeah.
And whereas to me, Mario's really slippery in Mario 64, and I'm just not a fan of that.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Banjo sticks a little better.
Yeah, and they have different kind of control dynamics as well. Because like with Mario, it's
100%.
Yeah, with Mario, it's a lot more quick, like twitchy kind of reactionary controls. With your jumps and your crouches and everything. Whereas like
that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, with Banjo, he kind of like lofts through the air a little bit slower, and then you have some more, like, I want to say special movements, like when your bird buddy comes out of the backpack and you walk on his back over special types of terrain and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like there isn't a similar aspect to Mario 64.
Right. So yeah, Banjo-Kazooie is definitely and Mario 64 is great. Do not get me wrong. It's a fantastic game. I just think for a first timer, I think people overhype it a little bit. It has the so-called Nintendo bump.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the best game on N64. It's probably the most iconic game.
Right.
But if you're new to N64, today, it might not be the best thing for you to start off with. It might even put a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I think if you get the Wii U version of the Mario 64 DS, that might be a better way to play. Not the DS version, just because it, like on a DS, because it doesn't it control with a touchscreen or something like that?
You can, but you don't. I always use the normal controls.
You use the D-pad to control them?
Well, on the DS, you had a little joystick.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Am I going crazy? Oh,
it was like a flat joystick, right?
no, I thought that was the 3DS.
Really?
I don't know. Okay,
Hold on.
well, we'll just have to edit all that out.
I'm looking it up.
Oh, you're looking it up. Here we go.
Oh wow, you're right. Yeah, it is just a D-pad. So yeah, when I played through it on DS, I used the D-pad.
Okay, gotcha. So, if you're averse to that type of playing and want a analog control, I recommend the Wii U port of Mario 64 DS. Some people hate that version. I don't know why they're so hateful to it. Yes, you start the game off as Yoshi, which is kind of interesting, but I think it's fun. Have you heard that? Have you heard about how much people hate on that game?
No.
People lose it, dude. I guess it's the same people that kind of overhype Mario 64 to begin with. Every time I watch a top 10 N64 games, and it's always Mario 64 at the top, or actually a lot of times it's Ocarina of Time, but Mario 64 will be like number 2. And I'm like, for what it did, yes, it's an important game. But if you're just looking pound for pound at what is a better game, I just don't think that game holds as much water as people act like it does. But that's just me.
No. I mean, it's awesome, but yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's an incredible game, but I agree with you. I think if you're going to do platforming on the N64, you should start with Banjo-Kazooie. Another game I wanted to call out, this is my preferred Zelda game on the N64, is Majora's Mask.
Uh-huh.
People seem to be in camps when it comes to this one. I just can't see why you would choose Ocarina over Majora's Mask when you can turn into a Zora and swim around. So that's my argument for that.
I would say play both in order.
True.
Do Ocarina and then Majora's Mask, and you're going to love both of them because they're both awesome.
Yeah, they're both great. They both hold up. I think, the Zelda games on the N64 are some of the best titles on the console. There's a reason that people put Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time at the top of their, top 10 lists. That's a consistent top 1 game is usually Ocarina, but some people are Majora's Mask fans, like myself.
I enjoyed Majora's Mask more than I did Ocarina.
Oh, okay, good. So you're in my camp too. But yeah, both games are great. If you don't have the RAM expansion pack, you can't play Majora's Mask. So something to keep in mind. Just if you buy an N64, just get one, like buy the RAM thing with it, the expansion. It makes some games run smoother too.
Yeah, if you find one at a yard sale or something, just open the door and it probably has one in there already.
Yeah, open it up, see if there's a little red thing there. And if so, you're good. If not, I think, I don't know, $20 on eBay, something like that. It's worth it to be able to play some really great later games on the N64. Another game I have to mention for the fact that it's become this crazy iconic franchise, Super Smash Brothers. Did you play this like when it first came out?
Yeah, I did. My next door neighbor had it. And I remember going to his place for his birthday party, and it was the perfect party game.
100%.
Yeah, we probably had like 8 7-year-olds or however old we were when that game came out.
Right.
Just sitting around the TV trading controllers to play this game. And it was so cool. Like everybody was so excited to play it.
Yeah, it's so good. I was actually the exact same. That's my first experience with Smash Brothers. My, once again, cousin Steven got it, and it was at his birthday party that I first played it, and I was terrible at it.
I was too. Yeah, I sucked.
Who wasn't terrible at it though? Like the concept is so weird, Speaking of it being a party system, that's actually something I wanted to talk about. Is the N64 the ultimate couch party system?
I'm gonna say no.
Ooh, what do you think is?
Yeah, I think the original Xbox beat it.
Okay, I think that's a very fair.
Yeah, for same screen multiplayer, I think playing Halo on the original Xbox, especially if you've got a bunch of dudes with game links, like a LAN party,
which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I do think that is superior to 4 players on an N64.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, the N64 had 4 controller ports, and it was the first one to do that.
Yep.
And PlayStation didn't really ever catch up. The PS3 was wireless, so then you could add more controllers as you went. But in terms of like having ports, PlayStation never caught on to that. Xbox was very wise when they came out to have 4 ports, and then GameCube had 4 ports. Yeah. But dude, let's just go through some of these games. Mario Party.
Yes.
Super Smash Brothers.
Yes.
GoldenEye.
Yes.
There are people who still prefer now I'm not a big wrestling game fan, but there are people who still, actually, my cousin, AJ Styles, prefers to play N64 wrestling games.
That's funny.
Yeah, he's like, I've seen some interviews with him where he's mentioned that. Apparently, he's like known for preferring specific N64 wrestling games. I don't know if you ever played these games, but there's a beat 'em up called Fighting Force.
Nope.
It's kind of like a 3D Streets of Rage.
Okay.
And it was on PlayStation as well. Once again, 4 players. Gauntlet Legends, which was amazing.
Yeah, Gauntlet Legends.
Yeah, those are so many great party games. And
Mario Kart.
I agree with you. Yeah, Mario Kart.
Diddy Kong.
Diddy Kong Racing. What else is there? San Francisco Rush 2049. The list just goes on and on.
Yeah, lots of racing games.
Yeah, that's actually another category. So party games. First of all, if you're getting an N64 for the first time, specifically, I want to call out Mario Party 3.
Oh.
Because it had a duel mode where you could play just against one other person, and it was a special map and a special board, and you actually had like a pet that followed you, and you could attack the other person.
Okay.
And no one talks about this. And so if I don't care if 3 other people listen to this podcast, somebody needs to know that Mario Party 3 has this amazing mode where you duel another player, and it's awesome. It's so good. And I would argue Mario Party 3 also had great mini games. 2 also had really good ones. 1's mini games were very like break your analog stick. So I don't recommend 1.
I actually did a sort of a deep dive on Mario Party recently because I was curious about which versions people enjoyed the most. Because I just recently, almost a year ago, I got my Switch. And just a couple months before that, I bought my Wii U.
Right.
And, I wanted to know which version of Mario Party to play with my roommates,
Right.
And I went on a little bit of a dive, and 3 is probably the most highly regarded for, at the very least, for N64, but maybe for the whole series.
Oh, really? Because a lot of people love 2.
I heard 3 was the best.
Good. That information needs to be disseminated.
I also think 3 is the most expensive if you're trying to find an original cartridge.
Speaking of which, that's actually something that we need to talk about. If you're in the market for an N64, please be careful to not buy fake games. I don't know if you've looked on eBay recently, but people are selling for $30 a piece, basically ROM hacks put onto a cartridge that's probably just reading from an SD card, like reading the ROM. Now, in terms of experience, you're probably getting a similar experience, but I don't know that for sure. I don't have a copy of one of those. So just be careful when you're getting N64 games to check that it's an authentic original copy. And, if you choose to take that risk with a copied game, first of all, that's illegal. But second of all, just be aware that it could not work. There could be some sort of glitch. Who knows? Okay.
I've got opinions here.
Okay, go for it.
So as far as the illegality of like file sharing and trading games and stuff like that,
right?
From my understanding, Nintendo isn't really interested in prosecuting buyers. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're definitely they're not, they're not excited about people ripping off their games for sure. But if they're going to go after somebody, they're going to go after the person who's doing the ripping and doing the selling and making the money.
Sure.
Because that's what it's really all about at the end of the day is the money, So like I wouldn't be afraid of, being arrested if you buy an illegal copy of a game or something like that. Having said that, don't go copying games and selling them because that's terrible.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I mean is like, let's not support people that are doing that because
Yeah, especially if you're ripping people off and being dishonest about it.
Yeah, they're putting labels on it that make it look like it's the actual game. And so now, like if you're checking game prices, you have to literally put authentic after whatever title you're looking for so you can actually see what a real, people are having to take the cartridge apart, and it's just causing a mess. And it's
Yeah. I've got my security driver in my hand as we're having this conversation.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, so just be aware of that if you're buying games and you want like the authentic game. Now, if you want to get like an EverDrive and just dump ROMs onto it on an SD card, I'm not suggesting that you do that, but people do that.
You can do it the right way, an EverDrive isn't an illegal piece of hardware.
Yeah, it's for backups.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're going to be serious about it, and you can be, you can be a video game preservationist.
Right.
If you're serious about collecting, you can buy rare cartridges and back up your ROMs and play them on your N64 and keep the original cartridges on the shelf where they're never going to go bad.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a great use of the EverDrive. Like instead of me constantly hurting the contact points on the N64, swapping cartridges, which it was designed to do, but over time that breaks down. Yeah. Whereas if an EverDrive's just staying in there, and I can just play my copy of Banjo-Kazooie that I own, but play my backup through the EverDrive. That's preserving that game and the console itself, because this stuff won't last forever.
Right.
We're gonna start running into that kind of stuff. People are already starting to run into like capacitors bleeding out and things like that on the original Nintendos, which, hey, good job, Nintendo. That's a pretty long time for a console to exist before it starts showing age really bad.
Totally.
Yeah, just keep that in mind. If anybody's buying games, just let's not support people doing illegal things. Let's try to buy authentic stuff. And N64 it's a funny console. It had a spike in game value for a minute, but it's pretty much chilled out. I think all the people in our generation got their copies, and now it's back down to kind of like normal prices. It's certainly cheaper than buying it brand new in the day. So, and I think that's the context. People try to get things as cheap as possible when they're collecting for retro stuff, but it's like, think about back in the day when you were spending what in today's money is $100 per game, plus you paid $290 or $199 for the system, which is like $300 something in today's money. So like you can get a console and quite a few great games for probably around $200, and then be authentic games. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
The N64 had just great party games. I'm glad you said Mario Party 3 is getting the honor and recognition that it deserves.
Yeah.
But specifically dual mode was awesome. Like I cannot stress enough. Somebody get Mario Party 3 and play freaking dual mode, please. And have your Chain Chomp pet eat Luigi while he has his little like Goomba pet try to fight off your Chain Chomp pet. Like that was so cool. And it's never been done again.
I want to play it.
It was so good. Whenever I come out, so I live in Georgia for those who need context, and then Josh is in California. So whenever I come out there, I will gladly play some dual mode.
Heck yeah.
That'll be awesome.
We'll do it. You want to hang out in here? You want to be on the podcast?
So Captain almost joined us.
Almost. He really considered it. He strongly considered it and then left.
I've weighed all my options, and I'm gonna just go lay on the couch. You mentioned earlier great racing games on the N64. Did you want to call out a couple?
Well, Rush 2 is the one that I owned.
Okay.
That I played a lot.
Yeah.
And that was like the game.
And what mode did you play a lot?
Stunt mode.
Stunt freaking mode. The only mode that you could enjoy, because tell me if I'm wrong here, but you'd be so for those who don't know, Rush was this racing game that just had the worst physics ever. Like it was so bad, but in stunt mode, you were just in this empty thing with ramps. It was like a skate park.
Yeah, it was like a skate park.
And it was so freaking awesome.
It was a skate park with obstacles.
It was so good. I mean, I would play for hours with Steven. And I know that you and I've watched you and Eric play before for like huge amounts of time, stunt mode, and just, dude, I'm going to go 200 miles an hour and hit this. Do you remember the ramp? I feel like this was everybody's.
Wait. I'm going to say it first, because I already know what you're going to say.
Say it.
You're talking about the one that looks like an hourglass.
Yes, 100% the freaking hourglass. Every time. Freaking 300 miles an hour. And also the speedometer in the game was just stupid. It was like, I'm going a billion miles an hour, you know. You would just hit that hourglass thing and just it never your car. First of all, your car was going to explode when you hit the bottom. Now, if it hit the bottom and you landed somehow, it was like the biggest thing ever.
It was amazing.
Yeah, that was the thing where it's like you turn to whoever you're playing with and you're like, did you see that?
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I know, you know.
And you got 8,000 points.
Yes. And it was just such a fun mode. So the game's probably cheap as it gets. So if you have an N64, please don't worry about winning any races, because basically what happens is you're driving your car and then you hit a million, kabillion, jillion miles an hour and it just completely loses control and it just drifts back and forth, hits a wall and blows up. That was every race ever. You could be going in a straight line and it would just lose control and blow up. And like the other racers were like glued to the track.
You know, I actually enjoyed racing.
You enjoyed racing? I mean, I enjoyed it too, but nobody needs to try to win. Like just play the game and hope for the best.
I don't know, man. When I was a kid, that was one of the games that like I was excited to have a memory card for, speaking of the name of the podcast. Because a lot of N64...
You were excited to insert a memory card?
Yeah. Because like a lot of N64 games, they would save your game on the cartridge.
Right.
But there were a couple that would use a memory card for like some extra information, basically.
Right.
So like, say if you played NFL Blitz, you would have to have a memory card in order to play like a full career mode, like across a whole season, because that's where it saved your data for like each individual game. But you didn't have to have it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas like with Rush, you could play the game just fine, and go through all the races and unlock whatever you want. But if you wanted to keep track of your track records, you had to have a memory card.
Right.
And I was super stoked to put my memory card in and try to break my own lap records.
Did it have the ghost mode?
I don't remember if it had ghost mode, but I do remember at the end of every race when like when you go to the arcade and you play a game and you get a high score, you put your initials in, right?
Right. I know where this is going.
Do you know what I'm gonna say?
What was like ASS or whatever?
No. The best part was the song that would play when it asked you for your name.
Oh, I don't know about this.
It did this goofy ass song, dude. It was so stupid. I don't even know how to describe what genre it would fit into.
Do I need to pull this up?
Yeah, go ahead. Pull it up.
Okay.
Look up Rush 2 What's Your Name? Because it has to be called What's Your Name?
It's like someone sampled Mario Kart music and just sped it up times like 5. It's like but it's like xylophones or something. That is terrible. Now, that was one thing that I will say did not age well on the N64 is because it didn't have disc audio.
Yeah.
Now, the cartoonier games, like I'll just say it again, Banjo-Kazooie, those were fine. And then, oddly enough, Resident Evil 2, which we've kept bringing up, it's like the one anomaly game that was like a PS1 game,
Yeah.
And kudos to those guys. Like, that's incredible.
Seriously. It really is. Like, that should never have happened.
No.
Considering what kind of work it took to make that happen.
No way.
It's kind of like Super Mario the movie. Like, that should never have happened.
That's also true. Also something we're going to have to talk about because I think we both have differing opinions on that movie.
I love it.
Maybe I need to watch it. I don't know. So yeah, Rush is such a great game, and for that what's your name section alone is worth the $3 that the cartridge costs or whatever.
What's your name?
What? That was amazing. I'm so glad you said something about that. So here's some other good racing games as well. You mentioned Diddy Kong Racing, which, by the way, okay. Here's a topic of conversation. I'm sorry, but I am not impressed by Mario Kart 64 like everybody else seems to be. Am I crazy?
No. Diddy Kong is superior.
Okay, that's what I thought as well. Diddy Kong is way better. Mario Kart 64, I think the thing that bothers me with it, and that bothered me as a kid, is I was like, why are the characters not 3D? Like, that made me so angry. And that, now for me back in the day, like, I was not, Yoshi's Story was kind of an exception to that, but in general, I was not cool with doing 2D stuff on a PlayStation or N64. I was like, put that junk somewhere else. That does not belong here. Nowadays, those games have aged well, and it was a good call. And dude, 32-bit 2D games look phenomenal. Like the 5th generation 2D games, like on PlayStation 1, they genuinely look amazing. But at the time, I was like,
you talking about like Castlevania?
Yeah, so Symphony of the Night, Street Fighter, like all the Street Fighter PS1 releases and stuff like that. What was it? Tabal? Was that what it's called? The little like...
Ooh, I don't know that one.
It's like the little dude with pink hair that ran around. It was kind of like 2D, 2.5D kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was so averse to models not being in 3D that like I basically like refused to play games. If like I would play Mario Kart 64 begrudgingly because other people wanted to play it, but I was not okay with this 2D sprite on a 3D track that like clicks. Remember how it would like the camera would rotate around Mario or Yoshi or whoever, and they would like click into these different perspectives of them. That's disgusting. Totally. Nintendo, you made Super Mario. Nintendo, let's talk about this. You made Super Mario 64, and then after the fact, you made Mario Kart 64. Now, keep in mind, Pilot Wings and Super Mario 64 were the original launch games, both of which were fully realized 3D.
Yes.
Pilot Wings 64, I should say, because there is Pilot Wings for Super Nintendo, which... I'm terrible at that game, but I enjoy that game so much. I don't know why.
It's just neat.
Yeah. Something about it just draws me in. Anyways, why on earth did they do that? I'm so like, I just have no grace for that at all. I know that it was an earlier N64 game, but I'm like, you made like, why didn't you just do 4 characters if that was the case? Like just do, I don't know. Gosh, that made me so mad. I just can't. Even when I play it now, like I'll play with my nieces and I'm like, why did they do this? Like, this is terrible.
That's funny.
I need to get Diddy Kong Racing so I don't just stay angry all the time. Another phenomenal game for N64, this was also on Dreamcast, if you have one of those as well, was Star Wars freaking Episode 1 Pod Racer. This game, I wanted an N64 so bad I couldn't stand it for this one single game. And when I got my N64 about 3 or 4 years ago, this was the game I made sure I had.
Really?
And yeah, luckily the dude that was selling it had this game. He just so happened to have it because it's kind of a random game on the console.
Yeah.
But it's great. It holds up great. It controls well. It feels, for the era especially, it really does feel like you're going really fast, and the pod racers feel a little out of control. Now you don't lose control and then crash into a wall and explode like in Rush. You just hit the wall. I can't tell you how many times I've done. And then sometimes in Rush, the car would just flip over and explode.
Yeah, because they couldn't flip you back over, so you just had to explode.
Yeah, it would just flipped over, and then it would just make a new version of your car. You just kind of appear.
Yeah, you get a fresh one.
Yeah, so Episode 1 Pod Racer is a great game. It was an arcade port. So imagine this, for those of you who haven't seen this arcade game before. You had a pod that looked like Anakin's Pod Racer, which, let's be honest, that's the only awesome scene from Episode 1 for the most part, not counting the Darth Maul fight, which, why did they squander Darth Maul? I'm so upset about that. to this day. Just I heard a perspective that was like, why didn't they like utilize Darth Maul throughout all 3 episodes? And like episodes 1, 2, and 3 were them like chasing him, and then they finally killed him in episode 3.
Sure.
I get the Anakin story, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. Or Anakin kills Darth Maul to become the apprentice in episode 3, like at the beginning or something,
Right.
instead of this random hitting the stomach. Not cool, George Lucas. Bad George Lucas. Anyways, as irredeemable as that movie is in some places, the games were awesome. And episode 1 Pod Racer specifically is a really great game. And I think it's a really good port from the arcade version. The Dreamcast version is the superior version if you want the highest fidelity graphics. But no matter which version you get in 64 or Dreamcast, it's a great game. Another game I have to shout out is Hydro Thunder. Boat racing game.
Hydro Thunder.
Yes, dude. Man, this was another arcade game that was ported over by Midway. And this was one of their better ports. I know you mentioned earlier that some of the Midway ports were, kind of so-so.
Yeah.
Man, Midway was huge back then. They like don't exist anymore, basically, if at all.
I know.
But I just thought of like 5 games off the top of my head. Like, I don't know if you remember War Gods, this fighting game. Nope. That was Midway. You had Hydro Thunder, Arctic Thunder. You had Cruisin' USA, I think was Midway. So it's like they just disappeared. I wish that they had put Arctic Thunder on the N64. I'm a little disappointed about that. I don't know if you remember that one, but you were on like a snowmobile instead racing.
Okay.
The arcade cabinet had a snowmobile, so it was awesome. Anyways, back to Pod Racer real quick. It was Anakin's pod, and you push the things forward and backwards to control it.
Yeah.
If you're a 9-year-old kid, you're Anakin freaking Skywalker right then. There's no questions asked. Like you are Anakin Skywalker in one of the best scenes from the movie.
Pretty much.
So just need to put that out there.
Yeah.
If you randomly have a lot of money, go buy that cabinet and have space for it, because that is one of the coolest arcade cabinets in my not so humble opinion.
I want to say that cabinet still exists in arcades today.
I'm sure it does. Most arcades have kind of, if the arcade's been around a little bit, they have these kind of like, older machines that still hold up pretty well. They're graphically not incredible, but like Crazy Taxi and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, that stuff is still around for sure. Yeah, if you see that game, just play it. Go get change for $1 or whatever you have to do to play that game. It's not the greatest game in the world by any means, but it's also a cheap cartridge as well. So you can get it for, $10 to $15. It's one of those games that comes a lot in lots as well. You mentioned NFL Blitz. That was a fun game.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
That was a very weird one. Do you remember taking the boat battery and hooking up the PlayStation to it and playing NFL Blitz on the school bus?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. You better not forget that ever, because that was the best.
Yeah, I was a little mad scientist, I guess, huh?
You 1000% were. I remember just being like, just remembering how smart you were. Like, I was like, why is Josh so smart? And I remember I thought you were really smart too, because you knew how to like hook up stereos and, put the red wire in the thing that clips in a red wire and the black wire. Like, I thought that was so intelligent at the time because you understood signal flow. Dude, Josh is so smart. He knows how to plug in a composite cable into input 1 and then select it on the TV.
Well, if it means anything, I always knew you were smart too.
Well, I appreciate that. It feels good. Feels good to hear. I just wasn't smart when it came to signal flow. In our defense, let's be honest. If you look at the back, if anybody's watching this or listening to this, I guess, and doesn't have like anybody that they know that has a CRT like tube TV, if you look on the back of one of the newer ones, like one that was made around 2000, they genuinely had a ton of inputs. And if you're thinking component and composite and S-Video, all of those had separate audio and video. And in component's case, had separate RGB or whatever, the different colored cables and audio. So there were just ports. You just look on the back of a TV and there'd just be this array of holes. And it was like, I just never was smart enough to like look at the little plastic line that was kind of drawn around each one. It was like, this is input 1. This is input 2. This is component. This says, I just like, I looked at it and got overwhelmed. And so I always thought you were so smart because you could like hook component or composite up through your VCR and then cut your VCR on and run it into the TV. I was like, man, Josh is so smart.
I love the phrase array of holes. It was an array of holes. And Josh knew exactly what to do.
Josh knew exactly how to fill those holes. Oh my gosh. I'm going to look this up. Sony Trinitron inputs.
Oh man, are we going to talk about the Trinitron now?
No, we're going to have a Tube TV episode. But okay, I'm looking at the back of this array of holes. Dude, it's okay. So right now, this is a Trinitron that I'm looking at the back of. Dude, it's the 36-inch. That's a monster.
That is a monster.
Dang, that's a big TV.
That's awesome.
Because my big, for everybody, I have a big Tube TV as well. That's an old video editing TV, and it's a 37-inch. And that sucker weighs 205 pounds of pure
glass.
Just glass. Yeah. Just glass and monstrosity. And
so much glass.
So much glass. Just good night. And it's
metal.
And metal. It's a metal chassis around it as well. So it's very heavy. It weighs 205 pounds. So that's pretty heavy. That's big human.
How many watts is that TV? Do you know?
I don't know. I'll have to pull that up. Let's see. I have the owner's manual. I have it saved on my phone just to reference to because the TV is so complex. Let's see here. We're going to find this out. For those who are like, what are you talking about? So back in the day, there were TVs that were these giant bricks that were not flat at all. Their screens were normally round, and they're actually a really great way to play older games and arguably the best way to play older games, depending on preference. Okay, let's see. Power supply.
The Trinitron specifically is a very excellent example of old school tube TVs.
Yeah. If you want to play old games the proper kind of way for cheap, instead of getting an upscaler and all these things, you can just get a Trinitron I would say within a couple of weeks of scouring Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, etc. There's also recycling centers. CRT TVs are very hard to recycle. So, and I want to do an episode that's just about CRT TVs and just nerd out. But if you can find a Sony Trinitron, those things are awesome. Okay. Also, my TV consumes 380 watts.
Damn.
Yeah. So it's big boy. Anyway, so I'm looking on the back of this Trinitron here on Google. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different input arrays to go back to our word of the day. And so you look on the back of these TVs for like a 10-year-old kid, that was so overwhelming to look at. So y'all got to cut me a break. Josh was smart because he knew how to read where it said input 1 and make sure that the audio and video all went into that one input. I was not blessed with that ability, apparently. But yeah, I always thought you were so impressive because you could do stuff like that.
No, you had it too, bro. You had it too.
I have it now.
You're just being nice. No, you did.
Nah. Yeah, right.
Yeah, man.
Sure. That's because I just did the. No, I got better once I got my GameCube because I had that switcher box because my TV only had one input.
Hey.
So that was good.
Do you still have that tabletop light that had Mario Repair Center on it?
It was okay. So it wasn't Mario Repair Center. It was RCA. It was for like DirecTV. And no, I don't.
No.
Yeah, I bet I know where it is.
Yeah.
Unless somebody threw it away, it may be in my when I taught middle school. It may be in that closet.
Bro, you need to dig that out.
Yeah, put it on top of my Tube TV.
Yeah, that thing was cool.
It was cool, and I found it for $1. So I was happy about that.
That's very cool. Anyway.
Yeah, well, before we tidy up, one thing that has to be mentioned about the N64 is the company Rare.
Yeah.
They made consistently some of the best games that are on the N64. And so I just wanted to name a few of these. There's Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, which was the sequel. Most people don't like Tooie as much. It did have some really interesting multiplayer modes. So it's a good version. There's no reason it's not bad. I think it's just that was when things were getting a little too collecty. That's right before Donkey Kong 64 when Rare took it too far. Just keep that in mind. There's a lot of crap to collect in that game, but it's still a great game. So that's Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, Diddy Kong Racing, as Josh mentioned, which was way superior. You could do kart racing, hovercraft racing, and plane racing. And it had bosses that you somehow like fought with your cart, something, and you raced them.
Yeah, it was a race.
Oh, it was a race. Okay. Yeah, Diddy Kong Racing. If you want to do kart racing, there's also, I think Rare made it as well, Mickey's Speedway.
Ooh, I never played that.
Also 3D. Yeah, a lot of people are saying that it's good. I haven't personally played it, but I've heard good things. It's not Diddy Kong, but it is good. He's not fat, but he is shapes. So that's my favorite Dane Cook reference that you taught me. So yeah, Diddy Kong Racing's great. Jet Force Gemini is like a third-person shooter game before that was popularized by Gears of War. It's not cover-based or anything, but just run around, shoot things, cute little space people. You could play as a dog as well that had a gun on his back, so that was awesome. There was Donkey Kong 64, once again, not for the faint of heart if you want to complete it. If you're okay with not completing it, it's an enjoyable, game to play for a little while. Conker's Bad Fur Day, which people are saying isn't holding up as well because the humor is very 90s, but that's like saying Austin Powers doesn't hold up because the humor is very 90s. Like, well, what do you think the humor is? The game was made in the 90s. Like, I don't know. To me, those arguments are kind of invalid. You have to, like, nobody watches a movie from the 70s and is like, well, the CG is far inferior because it's not CG. Well, duh, it's from the 70s. Like, what do you think? So I don't know. That's my take. What do you think about that? I've not personally played much of Conker.
Yeah.
But I do know everybody loved it.
My only experience with Conker is watching a roommate play the PS4 Conker.
Okay. And what did you think about it?
I was surprisingly pleased with it, actually. Like, without any context, I didn't know what it was. As a backseat viewer, it was entertaining, which isn't always true when you're not holding the controller,
Right.
So I thought it was good. And I feel like it was a good deal too. I don't think it was expensive or anything. But I never played the N64 version.
So yeah, there's Conker. I think you would agree with this, Josh. GoldenEye is one of those games that was amazing for its time, but that one, unfortunately, the controls are very hard to adjust to. Halo kind of ruined that for GoldenEye. The dual stick control is just so intuitive.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There is a little known fact about GoldenEye. You can actually play a dual controller mode where you plug up two controllers and use the joystick from one in your left hand and the joystick from the other in your right hand.
I've heard about this. Okay, so that's not like a mod or anything. That's an actual thing.
That's an original gameplay mode. And I remember...
Interesting.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, one of my friends, his older brother, like, competitively played GoldenEye, and that was the controller mode that all of the competitive players used.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So you could play with two sticks, but you have to take up two controller ports.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a Wii port too. I don't know if it's any good.
I wouldn't call it a port. It's definitely a remake. I actually tried playing it a couple months ago, and it does not hold up. It was laughably bad. Like, I turned it off within 20 minutes.
That's awesome. You've got something crappy when...
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty excited to play it. I think I was expecting something more like Metroid for the Wii.
Right.
Where, like, you can control your crosshairs with the Wiimote, but then you move with the stick, and it just didn't make sense like Metroid did.
Right.
It was terrible.
Yeah, so GoldenEye is, I think a better game to play would be the later James Bond first person shooters, like Agent Under Fire, that was on like the 6th generation of consoles.
Yeah, like on Xbox.
Yeah, I had the dual stick controller. So if you want to get like a James Bond first person shooter feel, GoldenEye is only so well regarded because no game had ever done something like that before on a home console.
Yeah.
And so it was the ultimate party game for sure. But it unfortunately that's one of the few times, or that's one of those times where it's like, this just doesn't hold up.
Yeah, it was a bummer.
Through no fault of its own. Nobody knew what they were doing, but it just controls so bad compared to now that you just can't go back to it.
Yeah.
Whereas you can forgive a camera control that's a little wonky. At least I can. But I've tried to play GoldenEye, and it's one of those things where you're like smiling because you're like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm playing like the game that everybody loved, and this is so cool. Relive my childhood, and like the smile fades away within about 3 minutes and turns to just sorrow.
Oh boy.
And misery and woe.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah, it's that point. It's kind of like, there's this logical fallacy that most people have a problem with, where you're like, when you've invested so much into something, you have a hard time giving up on it.
Yes.
So like if you've invested a lot into like a car or something and it's just not getting fixed or whatever, there's this part of your brain that's like, but I've put this money into it. I need to keep doing this. It's worth something because I've put money into it. And it's like, no, your car's just a piece of crap. It was kind of like that. Like you get to that point where you're like, but this game, but childhood,
yeah,
but school bus, and everyone loved it, and you have to like wrestle with yourself for a second to go, just put the game down, Josh. It's okay. Your inner monologue has to be like, no, Josh, you're done here.
Yeah. In some cases, that's easier said than done.
10,000%, especially when nostalgia is kicking in. That's hard. It's hard to objectively look at these things. And I do think you should look at specifically the 5th generation. I think every other console generation holds up way better. But I think with the 5th generation, you do need to look through it through a historical lens.
Yeah, I recommend talking to friends and being like, because most everybody, I assume, is playing games to some degree these days, especially during quarantine, talk to your friends and be like, hey, have you played this game since we were kids? There's one of those games for me is Sonic Adventure 2 Battle.
We're going to talk about that game a lot.
You are actually the reason I even know about that game. And
yeah, I played the mess out of that game.
Yeah, when we were kids, we loved it. I can remember specific moments at Eric's house in Sky Lake or at your place. Yeah. Or your place with the Chow Garden.
Yep, your place. I remember playing at your place too.
Yeah, so I was pretty acutely aware of the game, even though I didn't own a GameCube.
Right.
And then in adulthood, I was probably 24 or 25, I think, when Dylan and I got the condo in Midtown.
Right.
And part of us moving in together he was like, I'm going to bring all my vintage consoles to the new place. We're going to play Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. And I was like, hell yeah, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, this is going to be the best game ever.
Yeah, dude, like first night at our new place, we're playing Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, and it just like it killed the mood. It killed it. It
killed the vibe.
It was like a cock block with video games. It was like an emotional cock block.
Right.
Because we were
ruin the night.
Yeah, we were like, we're gonna be like little kids again. And we were not.
Nope, you were adults with perspective. And
yeah, so like if
I haven't played that game.
Yeah, like you haven't played it, right?
I haven't played it since, and
yeah, don't.
I'm frankly scared to. Yeah.
No, don't do it. It will ruin it for you. Like just keep the memory of how awesome it was and don't play it ever again.
I would just like to say I genuinely think that if Sega just produced a well thought out Chow raising game, just digital download only, $10, whatever, I think it would do really well. I could be wrong, but
it was extremely complex. Like I said, I didn't own it, so I didn't have the time or the opportunity to play the Chow Garden because it does take a lot of time and commitment.
Right.
But I sent you a video a couple weeks ago. Like an hour and a half long video.
100%, yeah.
It's just strictly about the Chow Garden and the differences between platforms and yada yada yada, a
Right.
bunch of nerdy stuff that's way too specific. But if there was like a Chow Garden game that was similar to say Pokemon Go,
Yeah, yeah.
that I feel like could be a big hit. Like it's almost like Pocket Pet, Digital Pet, Tamagotchi meets Pokemon Go, where it's like an AR, like reality, location based sort of thing.
Yeah, like that's how you find your power-ups and animals and the stuff that you like give the chow.
Yeah, especially considering Sonic is a character that is known for being fast and speedy and running. Like
Right.
you could incorporate some
Oh.
sort of like running like step counter or a calorie counter or something like that. You know,
Dude,
that would be rad.
Sega, please get on this. We need to just copyright this or something and be like, here, Sega, we will save you and you will earn lots of money. And all we want
know.
is for you to make this game. I don't want any part. You don't have to give me money. I just want you to make it.
I wish making a game was as easy as having an idea, you know?
I wish having an idea was I wish a lot of things were as easy as having an idea. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But then I guess creative things wouldn't hold as much water. Okay, so I got 3 more games for Rare, and then I'll see if we have any other final parting games. So Blast Core, have you heard of this game?
I have not.
Okay, so the premise is I haven't played it myself. It is one of those things that a lot of people put on hidden gem lists or just great N64 game lists. Rare made it. Basically, a nuclear warhead is coming into town, and you take control of various vehicles that can destroy buildings, and you're basically clearing buildings and obstacles out of the way of the warhead so that it can pass safely through town.
Interesting.
And if it hits anything, it blows up. And so it's kind of like this interesting puzzle game. Because, like, for instance, there's a bulldozer, there's like a mech that's really good at like stomping on buildings, like skyscrapers and stuff. And so you need to change what vehicle you're using based on what kind of buildings there are. So if there's a lot of skyscrapers, you would get in the mech. If it's a lot of like lower buildings, you need to do the bulldozer. Like the mech isn't going to do much good. And then there's a punching bulldozer that like punches out sideways. That's really useful if there's a lot of buildings lined up beside each other. So anyways, really cool game, really neat idea. I think it would make a great, once again, like digital download, $5 game. I don't think it would take them much effort, honestly, to do another game like that. But most of these games, if you're an Xbox owner, they are on the Rare Replay that's on Game Pass, or you can just buy Rare Replay for like $20 or something like that. Most of the games that I've mentioned here are part of that. GoldenEye's not, and Donkey Kong 64 isn't. So GoldenEye definitely isn't. It wouldn't matter if it was. It wouldn't be good. But yeah, pretty much any of the ones that are Rare owned IPs are going to be part of the Rare Replay. So Diddy Kong Racing and Donkey Kong 64 wouldn't be there, but both Banjos, Conquer, and it's the like up-resed Conquer that came out on the original Xbox. I don't know if you remember that remaster, but Conker's little bushy squirrel tail never looked so good. Yes, those are that's a good game. Blast Core is Perfect Dark, in my opinion, seems to hold up better than GoldenEye based on what I'm hearing. Once again, I don't have any experience with the game. I remember everyone loved it.
Yeah, that's another one that I didn't play as well.
Yeah. So I don't have much to say on it. I do know that people enjoy it a lot. So if you want to try that first person, I would assume that the Rare Replay version also has twin stick shooting control. So from what I understand, it holds up pretty well. But I don't know if that holds much water. If that quote holds much water. There's also Killer Instinct. I think Killer Instinct has improved a lot in more recent times. I remember playing this game and thinking that the characters looked cool, but not enjoying playing it. But I also didn't like Mortal Kombat, and some people love Mortal Kombat. So it just depends on your fighting game style. I'm just not very good at fighting games in general. I wish I was, because I really like fighting games. I just suck at them.
I do too.
And I just can't get better. Like, what the crap? It's just not cool. To me, Killer Instinct lumbers a little bit.
It's probably our ADD, bro.
Must be. There's something.
It's killing our reaction time.
Yeah, it's killing. I think you know what it is it's probably killing our ability to concentrate on like one fighter and get really good at that one person.
I don't know. I just want to blame something other than my talent.
Just blame anything else. But yeah, that's all I have for Rare.
Yeah, it's not because I suck.
Yeah, couldn't be that. Couldn't be that. No way. No way, no how. Are there any other games that you wanted to mention before we kind of close out of this? Man, this is a long inaugural episode, but
yeah,
I'm loving it.
Yeah, dude, I'm down to just keep chatting as long as you want. Because I don't have anything going on. I don't know if you need to get to bed at some point. Because what?
I'm gonna have to. It's 12:40 over here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but did you have any like parting games that you wanted to bring up, or just final points that you wanted to chat about that you feel like we haven't covered?
Paper Mario.
Oh yeah, what's wrong with me?
Yeah, Paper Mario got its debut on 64. I just recently played through Origami King, and it was awesome.
Oh, okay, that's the newest one, right?
Yeah, it's definitely better than the more recent installments like Sticker Star. Definitely not as fun.
Right.
The fun thing about Sticker Star is that it's like there's a lot of interaction with the touchpad, which I guess is what they were going for, on the Wii U.
Right.
But it's also like a lot of unnecessary touchpad interaction.
Right.
So it's like, why am I having to do all these steps when it could just be one step?
Love those gimmicks.
Yeah, exactly. They're just really trying to lean hard into the touchpad more than they should have. But the new one is so funny. I laughed out loud a lot.
That's good to know. I know Thousand Year Door seems to be, which is the GameCube release, seems to be the crowd favorite.
I've heard that.
Yeah, so I had Thousand Year Door. Once again, to all the naysayers back in middle school, I won. I picked the best console, bang for buck. I'm just putting it out there. We can chat about the 6th generation of consoles at some point, because that was a big war. We absolutely will. That's definitely coming up. Coming soon. But yeah, I think the N64 version of Paper Mario is well regarded as well. It's not Thousand Year Door. This is all based on just crowd opinions. I know that Thousand Year Door is amazing from personal experience, but I haven't personally played the 64 version. But from what I hear, it's
very cool.
A great game.
Yeah, it's very cool. They were obviously trying to do something different, and I think they succeeded. If you've ever played Super Mario RPG for the Super Nintendo,
that's on the to-do list.
Yeah, it's got a very similar feel as far as like tone, like Super Mario RPG's got a lot of humor in it. Same thing for Paper Mario.
Right. I think the Mario RPG genre in general is I don't think underrated is the right word, because it's highly rated by those who have played it. But like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, things like that.
Yeah.
All those kind of RPG like games they're really great. Underrated is not the right word. Just
appreciated.
Yeah, underappreciated. They're not marketed. They were never marketed very well.
Yeah, that's true.
They're kind of niche, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, something like that. But
I guess Nintendo probably just knew that the kind of fan that was interested in that, it was going to be aware of it, whether it was advertised or not.
That's a good point. Are there any other games that you wanted to mention? That was a really good one, Paper Mario.
Yeah, that's the one that we hadn't talked about.
Star Fox 64.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That is, but I'm a big fan of the Super Nintendo Star Fox. Once again, just nostalgia. I had a Super Nintendo. I bought it after my PlayStation. So my mom saw that somebody was selling a Nintendo, and that's all she knew. And so she thought and assumed it was a 64, and turned out it was a Super Nintendo.
Oh.
And so I bought it thinking it was an N64, and was so disappointed when it was a Super Nintendo. But they had some great games on it, so it ended up being a really good thing. But anyways, Star Fox, both the 64 version is, I think most people regard it as the best version.
Yeah.
And it graphically holds up really well. That's probably one of the best looking games on the N64. Yeah. There's, once again, I've said it a million times, Banjo-Kazooie looks great, but Donkey Kong 64 looks great. Diddy Kong Racing looks great, but that one, as far as the Nintendo first party games, that's a really good looking game too. And it plays well. There's really nothing wrong with it that I know of.
Yeah.
And it's just you can sit down for like an hour or whatever and beat it, just a fun playthrough, co-op mode, all good things. So that's definitely one to check out. I think that's all I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely missing some. I want to say Mario Tennis.
Oh, yeah, tennis, Mario Golf,
Yeah,
both great
yeah.
games.
Like I don't know if they are, if you would necessarily say they're like must play games, but
Yeah.
I think I want to say Waluigi made his first appearance on Mario Tennis 64.
Yes, that's true.
So if you're a fan of
Or
Waluigi,
Mario Golf, whichever one came out
yeah.
first.
So if you're a fan of Waluigi, you pretty much have to go back and play that game.
Yeah. And they do hold up well. They're really good games. Like you said, like I don't know if you've played Mario Tennis on Switch, but that game's awesome.
I haven't.
It's really great. So it's by no means a superior version to that, but it's one of those games that's like $10. I could be way off on my prices, but it tends to fall in that kind of cheaper category of games.
Yeah.
So if you're at a local gaming store or it's part of a lot, certainly don't write it off and be like, oh, don't write it off with the Madden 99s or whatever. It's not like that. It's a really good game.
Word.
Also, the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games are phenomenal. They're best played on PS1 though, or Dreamcast because of the CD quality audio. So play them if you want to, or just get the remasters that just came out. I mean, that's probably the best way to play the Tony Hawk's games, but those are good games as well. I'm sure we've missed some, but as kind of a final thing, I just wanted to say, a lot of people give the N64 crap, but I think Josh and I have both made a pretty good case for it.
It's a special experience in the Nintendo lineup.
I agree. It honestly, everybody rates it usually pretty low. I don't really think it's that fair to rank Nintendo consoles, to be honest. All of them have awesome games on them. I do have some that I hold in higher regard than others, but yeah, it is definitely a unique experience, for sure. I think it represents an interesting period for Nintendo where they got a little cocky and went a little too far out of their comfort zone.
Yep.
And made some mistakes.
Yep.
I'm thankful, to be honest, that it didn't do as well as it did. And we'll talk about this more in the N64 versus PS1 episode that we're going to do. I think had it not done kind of poorly by comparison, I don't think Nintendo would have tried what they tried with the GameCube, which is my favorite Nintendo console. That certainly nostalgia is playing a role in that, but a lot of people like it as well, so I'm not the only one. I think it caused Nintendo to refocus and rethink some things and try new things with the GameCube. So really those two consoles are like the more unique Nintendo experiences to me. And then Wii was where they kind of solidified, like, we're not competing with anybody. We're just going to do Nintendo.
Yeah.
And so that fifth and sixth generation really represents an experimental time for Nintendo where they were trying to find their way and kind of didn't twice in a row. But because they were trying to figure things out, some great things happened. Some not so great things happened, but some really great things happened. Specifically, I think a lot of great things that happened on the GameCube were in response to things that didn't happen on the N64.
Yeah, I mean, GameCube is the successor to N64, but, not just chronologically, but mechanically, it also is very similar to the N64. A lot of games that would have been originally programmed for something like the 64 dual disc.
Yeah, the disk drive thing.
Yeah, the disk drive were canceled for disk drive and then revamped for GameCube. Or there might be some technologies that were designed for disk drive games that never happened, but then they continued to use that technology for the GameCube. So they're more closely related than I think people realize. And then again, same thing between GameCube and the Wii. There's a lot of mechanical, like physical similarities as far as the processing goes and what they were trying to do with the system.
Yeah, the Wii is basically a GameCube with a slightly souped up processing.
Basically.
But it's pretty much a game. Like when people make mini GameCubes or portable GameCubes, they're just using a Wii. Yeah, the N64 is definitely the black sheep of the Nintendo family. Now, yes, the Wii U sold poorly, and so some people would view it as that, as the black sheep console. But I think in terms of just kind of sticking out and being different than what the typical, like the Wii U was unsuccessful due to marketing, but
Yeah.
it isn't a different Nintendo console. Like they didn't stick their necks out and do anything odd with the Wii U like they did with the N64. Like
Yeah.
they pushed their limits a little too far and kind of pulled a Sega with the N64 and took a page out of Sega's book of like pushing the boundaries, and it cost them a little bit, and their cockiness made it cost them a little bit too, going into that fifth generation with the N64. So yeah, if you have never played an N64, please get your hands on one and play one. It's definitely it's like a time machine back into the 90s in so many different ways. And I think it's important to look back on these things. Like we take so much for granted in 3D games, and the N64 and PlayStation 1, they did the heavy lifting for a lot of this stuff. Things that we think are normal were not normal back then and had to be figured out. I think more respect needs to be given to these consoles. So a lot of people do respect them, but there's a lot of people that kind of hate on this generation. And I think you need to look at it through the context of like, these were important consoles that raised the bar, and they didn't raise it well, but they did raise the bar, and they made a way for new gaming experiences that previously had never happened before. So get your hands on an N64 and see the beginnings of like why Mario Odyssey is so awesome, and Zelda Breath of the Wild, and all of these games. Pretty much any game with 3D movement, Mario 64 is kind of the grandfather to all of those things. And so I just want to encourage people, go play some of these games, even if it's through something like Rare Replay or the new Mario 3D All-Stars collection.
Yep. That's what I was going to get at. Like, if you don't want to go through the process of buying an N64, tracking down the games that you want to play, there's a lot of new remasters or virtual console games on the Wii U. I know there aren't as many on the Switch, but you can legitimately buy copies of these old games on newer systems and play them for the first time without having to get any special hardware to plug into your HD TV or anything like that. Like it's totally possible to just get on the internet with your Wii U and play an N64 game legitimately for very little cost.
Yeah, and same for they closed the original Wii shop, but Wiis are very cheap, and there's a good chance that you can find a Wii that has some of these games already installed on it. Their virtual console had a pretty decent N64 lineup. You can get Ocarina of Time, I think Majora's Mask. I know you can get Mario 64. You can get Smash Brothers. So there's quite a few. Basically, if it's an N64 game, beyond like Rush, which just has a special nostalgic thing for us. So beyond like those types of games and Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racer, like you can get these games in a legitimate manner right now and probably play the definitive version of it as well. Like there's probably some improved things. I've been hearing some backlash on the Mario 3D All-Stars. Apparently the camera's not inverted or something like that, and that's throwing some people off. You wouldn't know that if you've never played it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
If it's your first time playing the game, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Those people can go play it on original hardware. So yeah, the Rare Replay is available on Game Pass, and it's cheap if you just want to buy the disc. And that's got a lot of your great N64 heavy hitters. And then beyond that, Nintendo's Virtual Console on the Wii U is still active. And so you can buy those games legitimately there. So yeah, find these games, play some of them, and just see how far we've come. If for nothing else, if it still feels really janky to you and you're having a hard time appreciating it, at least now you can appreciate what kind of groundwork these games laid and the system laid. I think it's a great console, but I know that's nostalgia talking for me. But that's all I have. Do you have any other final thoughts?
Pokemon
Freaking snap.
I just wanted to say Pokemon.
Just, man, that's a whole episode. Just, man, Pokemon in general.
Yep.
Oh, Pokemon. I will say, I don't know if you experienced this, but Stadium was so disappointing to me because I wanted to move around in a 3D world. I didn't want to fight. I wanted to be Ash Ketchum in 3D walking around.
Yeah, that didn't happen until this generation.
No, like, come on, Nintendo. You couldn't have made a console.
Yeah, they could have. They absolutely could have. They just didn't.
Nintendo, not cool. That was, and then now apparently like people are kind of disappointed with Sword and Shield in some ways. They
That's what I'm saying. It's not even that good.
quote unquote generic.
Yeah.
Yeah, you waited too long, Nintendo. If you had done this, I understand if you didn't do it on N64 because like it had no space, so it's hard to do like anything. There was like one RPG on the N64 and it was terrible. But you know, when the GameCube came out, why did you not do this? You squandered an amazing opportunity in Nintendo. Shame on you. You made enough money with Pokemon, but you could have made even more. But whatever. But Pokemon Snap is a great game, so yeah.
Let's blame Game Freak instead of Nintendo.
Okay, Game Freak, shame on you. Nintendo, love you. Is that better?
Love you, bye.
Love you, bye. Hey, well, that's all for the episode today. It's a long one. Yeah, I'm excited for where this podcast is going to go. This is once again our inaugural pilot episode. Hopefully, it's not like the pilot episode of House MD where it has the awkward music that just does not work. We'll save that for an episode when we talk about House MD because that'll probably happen at some point. But yeah, this is Insert Memory Card, nostalgia podcast, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And there are more episodes to come. We're going to be hitting a lot of consoles in a row and talk about some console wars coming up as well. So definitely stay tuned. And yeah, I'll see you later. See you, Josh.
Bye.
Bye.